Welcome back to Inside Tennessee. That map in front of you is what the Knoxville City Council districts look like, and 5 of them were in play last week and are in play for the next couple months until November the 2nd. If you look at kind of how they're designed, it's kind of in a curlicue. You start with District 1, which is that blue South Knoxville district, and then we swing left going 2, 3. We're going to skip 5 because that district is not in play this fall, and then you've got 4 and then 6, which kind of finishes it out. 6 is an interestingly laid out district. There's a lot of East Knoxville there, but then you kind of come across, you've got some downtown heading west. So that gives you kind of a layout of the land, and we're talking with our pundits and our experts and friends Don Bosch and Susan Richardson Williams about the primary, and we'll be looking ahead to what we can expect in the general. So we covered District 4. Let's hit on District 1, and as I said, that's that blue district. Susan, any observations from that race? That was Tommy Smith coming out along with Elizabeth Murphy.
Right. I think the surprise to me was that David Hayes, who had run before, David is part of the city council movement, certainly progressive candidate. He had run before and got, I think, 10,000 votes. Now, that was a general election, but he only got 16% of the vote in this race. Elizabeth Murphy got 30, and of course, Tommy Smith was the incumbent with 53. Tommy was appointed. He has not run in an election before, so this is his first time to be on the ballot. But the Elizabeth Murphy was backed by the Scruffy City PAC and has raised a significant amount of money for a first-timer. And so, but for me, again, the surprise was David not getting more votes.
I guess you would say perhaps that of the incumbents, Tommy would be the one that might be the most vulnerable, or no? What do you think, Don?
Tommy or possibly Lauren, but Tommy's done a good job for that district. He's well liked. He's also making himself known citywide, which is, again, going to be the important feature for the general. I still definitely would put my money on the incumbent Tommy in that race. I just don't think, again, with Elizabeth Murphy being backed by a conservative cause in a blue city, I think she's going to have a very tough time pulling off a citywide election for city council.
South Knoxville, of course, is its own critter. I used to live there. I love it. I'm very fond of South Knoxville. Do you see any issues in particular or voting blocks in South Knoxville that are sort of distinctive?
Well, South Knoxville's had issues with infrastructure for how many years? Certainly as long as I've lived in Knoxville, which is 33. And there is a lot of growth there. The urban wilderness has done great things there. It's almost sort of become the green part of our city. And so there are plenty of issues at the city that Elizabeth and Tommy both can address. But I agree with Don. Tommy has probably more citywide recognition that Elizabeth has. But again, if she raises the money and she makes it, makes it a competitive race, then we'll see what happens.
And Don?
Yeah, South Knoxville really has become, in some ways, a pretty diverse district. You've got a lot of old families and longtime residents. And then, as Susan mentioned, the urban wilderness, you have a lot of younger families and more active families. I jokingly started calling it Hipsterville. It really has become sort of the new short North Knoxville in some ways. So there's a very, an interesting mix of folks out there. But again, with this going to a citywide election, I still favor very strongly, Tommy is the incumbent and someone, who's going to be seen as more progressive, more Democratic leaning and small d, or big D, excuse me, than certainly the scruffy city candidate Elizabeth Murphy.
Who would have ever thought you would call South Knoxville Hipsterville, but there you go.
Tell me I'm wrong, John. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I hang out a lot on Sevier Avenue, and I consider myself like that. So you nailed it. Susan, you want to make a point?
Well, one point was that Tommy got 53% of the total vote. And when you put David Hayes 16% and Elizabeth 30%, that's a 46%. Now, I'm not saying that everybody voted for David would turn and vote for Elizabeth. But the fact that, if you combine some of the totals on that, it could end up being a close race.
Okay, let's move on.
I don't think
then
anybody that voted for David's going to vote for Elizabeth, Susan.
May not.
Yeah, that's probably true. All right, let's move on to District 6, which was another closely watched race because Gwen McKenzie is the incumbent. She is the vice mayor. She has been high profile for a number of reasons. She's married to Sam, who we all know is a state rep for that area and has been around the area, used to be on county commission. So that's a high profile race, and you had two other candidates there, and Garrett Holt ended up being the person to finish as well and will be on that ballot in November. Race good money, respectable race, almost akin to the Tommy Smith, Elizabeth Murphy showing. So Don, your observations about District 6 and what we learned from it or what we should be watching for.
Well, Gwen is as strong and well known of a city council member, vice mayor as we have. That district, again, in a citywide race, I think Gwen's popularity will help her. Garrett, though, is a good candidate, and he's going to get some votes, but Gwen McKenzie is political royalty, so to speak, and I don't mean that as a disservice. I mean that her family has been around politics a long time. They know how to operate a campaign. They'll get plenty of money. Gwen is well liked, and she is outspoken with some of the problems in her district and that go on in the city. And I think Gwen is very good and very appropriate for city council. And I think Garrett will have a hard time beating her, but it's going to be a good race. And I'm glad to see that there's two good candidates in that race. But again, Gwen should win that race.
Susan, I want to hear from you, but I think it's time for one of those breaks where we make a little money and you can refill your coffee cup. You're watching Inside Tennessee. Please come back.